They are ancient, opportunistic, and largely invisible. They are in the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the ground we walk on. They are fungi. Fungi form their own kingdom of life, with millions of species ranging from microscopic yeasts to sprawling networks of mold. Thankfully, only a small fraction of these have the ability to infect animals. In fact, approximately 300 fungal species are known to cause disease in humans, a tiny minority, yet they exact a surprisingly heavy toll. Far from being mere nuisances like athlete's foot, fungal infections are estimated to kill around 2 million people worldwide each year, a death count higher than that of tuberculosis or malaria. This stark statistic hints at the often overlooked menace fungi pose when they invade living hosts. Fungal pathogens are astonishingly diverse. Some are yeasts, single-celled organisms like Candida, which normally live harmlessly on our skin or gut, but can turn deadly in the right conditions. Others are molds such as Aspergillus, which release airborne spores that can lodge in the lungs. There are dimorphic fungi that can shapeshift, growing as filamentous mold in the environment, but switching to a yeast-like form inside a warm-blooded host. And there are even aquatic fungi like chytrids that swim with tiny tails, responsible for deadly infections in amphibians. These pathogens target a wide array of animals. Insects, amphibians, mammals, even other fungi can fall victim to fungal parasites. Markedly more fungi are known to attack plants than animals, but the relatively few that infect animals exhibit a remarkable variety of strategies and effects. To appreciate their diversity, consider a few examples. Some fungi stay on the surface, digesting keratin in skin or nails. These cause ringworm, athlete's foot, and other common skin infections. Other fungi strike deeper. For example, histoplasma grows in soil enriched by bird or bat droppings and, when inhaled, can cause lung disease in humans. Cryptococcus, a yeast with a thick protective capsule, can invade the lungs and spread to the brain, causing meningitis, especially in people with weakened immunity. In the wild, the chytrid fungus Batrachochytrium infects the skin of frogs and salamanders, while another, Pseudogymnoascus, targets hibernating bats. The cast of fungal villains is diverse, yet they share one trait. They exploit ecological niches and weaknesses in their hosts to establish infection. Fungi are often thought of as nature's decomposers, turning dead matter into soil. It's true that most fungi prefer feasting on the dead, but when circumstances allow, some will extend their reach into living organisms. Animals and humans generally have strong defenses against fungi. For example, high body temperatures, robust immune systems, and skin barriers, which is why serious fungal diseases in healthy individuals are relatively rare. But when those defenses falter, or when a particularly adaptable fungus comes along, infection can take hold. The relationship between fungi and their animal hosts is complex. So let's explore how these stealthy invaders infiltrate animal hosts, what havoc they wreak, and even how a few fungi can seemingly puppet their hosts' minds in ways that sound like a science fiction movie. For a fungal pathogen, the journey from the external environment and into a host is the critical first step. Unlike viruses or bacteria that might ride on a sneeze or a mosquito bite, fungi typically rely on hardy spores or hyphal fragments to do the job. These spores are everywhere, floating in the air, mixed in soil, clinging to surfaces, waiting for the right host to come along. The means of entry can differ vastly depending on the type of fungus and the host. Organism it ends up infecting. Many fungi infiltrate animal bodies when their spores are inhaled. The route of transmission is therefore airborne. To a human walking through a dusty barn or a wind-swept desert, fungal spores are invisible hitchhikers in the air. Take coccidioids, the fungus that causes valley fever. In dry soils, it forms long filaments that fragment into tiny spores. When the soil is disturbed by wind, farming, or construction, clouds of these spores launch into the air. A person breathing in that dust can carry the spores deep into their lungs. There, in the warm, moist environment of the lung, the spores awaken and begin to grow, marking the start of an infection. Similarly, histoplasma and cryptococcus spores or yeast cells can be inhaled from soil contaminated with bird droppings or decaying wood, implanting in the lungs without the person even realizing it. Another route of transmission is through the skin. Our skin normally shields us from fungi, but a break in that armor can let them in. Certain fungi are adept at entering through wounds or abrasions. Sporothrix schenki, for example, is a mold found on rose thorns and sphagnum moss. A gardener pricking a finger on a thorn might implant Sporothrix spores under the skin, leading to rose handler's disease, an infection that ulcerates the skin and can track up the arm via lymphatic vessels. Even without a traumatic injury, fungi can parasitize the skin surface. Dermatophytes, the fungi that cause ringworm and athlete's foot, spread by direct contact, attaching to the outer dead layer of skin and secreting enzymes to burrow into it. They don't need a deep invasion. They simply colonize the keratin on skin, hair, or nails, and cause itchy, scaly rashes as a byproduct of their feeding. In the insect world, fungal invasion is often a full-on assault. A spore landing on an insect's body can germinate and directly penetrate the tough exoskeleton. Researchers have observed that the infamous zombie ant fungus, Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, begins its infection of an ant when a microscopic spore attaches to the ant's outer shell and drills inward. The spore grows a tube-like hypha that breaches the cuticle and enters the insect's body cavity, where it can proliferate. Many entomopathogenic fungi, or fungi that infect insects, employ this tactic, essentially using mechanical force and enzymes to break into their host's body. Once inside, the fungus switches to a yeast-like growth or continues as fine filaments spreading through the insect's tissues. Gaining entry is only half the battle. Next comes surviving the host's defenses. Fungi have evolved clever ways to evade or withstand the immune response. For instance, when we inhale fungal spores, our immune system's first responders, cells called macrophages, attempt to engulf and destroy these intruders. Some spores, however, are stealthy. Dormant fungal spores often have tough outer coats, like a hydrophobin protein layer, that help them hide from or resist immune attack. If a spore can resist being killed long enough to germinate into an active fungus, it can start to grow into the surrounding tissues. At that point, the infection is established. In humans, most pathogenic fungi have the remarkable ability to grow at our body temperature of 37 degrees Celsius, a necessary trait if they are to survive in us. Many environmental fungi simply cannot thrive at such high temperatures. This is one reason why we aren't infected by every mold we inhale. The ones that do manage it, however, find our bodies to be nutrient-rich and hospitable in other ways. Once a fungus has a foothold, it often switches forms to adapt to conditions inside the host. Some fungi that exist as spores or filaments outside will convert to a yeast form in the body, appearing as round budding cells that can disseminate via the bloodstream. This dimorphic switch is seen in histoplasma, blastomyces, coccidioids, and others. It's a clever strategy, as the yeast form can multiply quickly and is better suited to evade immune cells. Other fungi remain as invasive filaments that can physically push their way through tissues. In either case, the micro-invader begins to exploit the host's resources, all while the host's immune system scrambles to contain the intruder. An uneasy battle is underway at the microscopic level, the outcome of which will determine whether the host clears the fungus, succumbs to disease, or ends up in a prolonged stalemate with a chronic infection. Fungal infections can produce an incredibly broad spectrum of diseases in animals and humans. Some are mild and superficial, barely more than a persistent annoyance. Others are invasive, chronic, or even acutely lethal. On one end of the spectrum, we have common fungal skin infections, the ringworm patch on a child's arm or the athlete's foot rash itching between toes. These are caused by dermatophyte fungi that digest keratin. They are irritating, but generally easily treated and not life-threatening. On the other end of the spectrum, we have illnesses like fungal meningitis or disseminated fungal infections that can kill with alarming speed, especially in vulnerable hosts. In nature, fungal diseases have wrought some of the most catastrophic epidemics observed in wildlife. A prime example is chytridiomycosis, the disease caused by the chytrid fungi Batrachochytrium dendrobatidae and Batrachochytrium salamandrivorans. This illness has swept across amphibian populations worldwide. As the chytrid fungi infects a frog's skin, it disrupts the skin's vital functions. Amphibian skin isn't just a passive cover, it's essential for breathing and maintaining electrolyte balance. The chytrid fungus thickens and destroys the skin, causing the frog to lose salts and water uncontrollably. In infected frogs, sodium and potassium levels plummet, ultimately leading to cardiac arrest. The outcome has been devastating. A global assessment found that chytrid fungi have caused declines in at least 500 amphibian species, including the outright extinction of 90 species. Imagine entire species of frogs and salamanders blinking out of existence, largely due to a microscopic fungus on their skin. It's an ecological tragedy that is still unfolding in parts of the world. Another wildlife catastrophe is white nose syndrome in bats. First noticed in North America in 2006, this disease, named for the white fuzz that appears on the muzzles and wings of afflicted bats, is caused by the cold-loving fungus Pseudogymnoascus destructans. The fungus attacks bats during hibernation, when their body temperatures drop and immune systems slow down. It colonizes the skin of their wings and faces, rousing the bats from hibernation repeatedly and causing them to burn through fat reserves. Many affected bats starve or freeze because they can't sustain the energy loss. White nose syndrome has killed millions of bats across the United States and Canada. In some bat hibernation caves, 90 to 100% of the bats have died within just a few years of the fungus's arrival. To visualize the impact, certain bat species that were once common have been virtually wiped out in regions hit by this fungal scourge. Even the animal companions and livestock in our lives can suffer fungal diseases. Cats, dogs, and farm animals frequently get ringworm, which, despite its name, is not a worm at all, but a fungal skin infection. Birds can contract respiratory fungal diseases like aspergillosis, especially if kept in damp, unclean conditions where mold thrives. Domesticated amphibians and reptiles in terrariums can catch chytrid infections or other fungal ailments if their environment mimics the conditions that breed those pathogens. The reach of fungal pathogens truly spans the animal kingdom. In people, fungal infections or mycoses range from everyday annoyances to deadly diseases. The superficial infections are widespread. Most of us have heard of candidiasis, for instance. Candida yeasts can cause thrush, a white overgrowth in the mouth, or yeast infections in the groin or other moist areas. These occur when the local microbiome balance is upset, say, after antibiotic use or in immunocompromised states, allowing candida that normally lives harmlessly on us to overgrow. Such infections can be uncomfortable, but they are generally treatable with antifungal creams or medications. However, if candida gets into the bloodstream, a condition called candidemia, especially in a hospitalized patient with a catheter or after surgery, it becomes far more serious. A systemic candida infection can cause sepsis and has a high mortality rate. Other fungi cause respiratory and systemic diseases that can affect even otherwise healthy people. We met coccidioids earlier, the cause of valley fever. When a person inhales a heavy dose of its spores from desert dust, they might develop flu-like symptoms: fever, cough, chest pain, and fatigue. Most recover, but in some cases, the fungus disseminates beyond the lungs, causing chronic lung nodules, skin ulcers, bone lesions, or meningitis. Valley fever can thus range from a mild illness to a severe, lifelong disease. In the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys of the United States, Histoplasma capsulatum lurks in soil enriched by bird or bat droppings. Farmers, construction workers, or spelunkers can inhale its spores and get histoplasmosis, another lung infection that can resemble tuberculosis if it spreads. Blastomyces dermatitidis, found in soil and rotting wood mostly in the Midwest and Southeast US, can also cause similar issues. Perhaps the most feared fungal infections are the opportunistic ones. These strike when our defenses are down. In clinical settings, immunocompromised patients are at high risk. For example, in people living with advanced HIV/AIDS, a ubiquitous soil yeast called Cryptococcus neoformans can seize the opportunity to invade the brain. Cryptococcal meningitis is a severe infection of the membranes around the brain and spinal cord. Without treatment, it is fatal, and even with the best treatments, it kills hundreds of thousands of people with AIDS each year in sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere. Cryptococcus has a slimy polysaccharide capsule that helps it avoid immune attack, allowing it to proliferate in the cerebrospinal fluid. Its victims may experience headaches, confusion, and coma as pressure builds in the brain. Another opportunist, Aspergillus fumigatus, is a common mold we breathe in daily with no effect. But in a patient with leukemia undergoing chemotherapy or someone on high-dose steroids, Aspergillus can take root in the lungs. It may cause a rapidly progressive pneumonia or even spread through the bloodstream, causing organ failures. The mortality rate of invasive aspergillosis in such patients is extremely high. Similarly, the fungi known as mucorales, which cause mucormycosis, usually don't bother healthy folks, but in people with uncontrolled diabetes or those recovering from organ transplants, they can invade sinus tissues and blood vessels, leading to the notorious black fungus infections that can destroy parts of the face and brain within days. From an itchy foot to an extinction-level wildlife plague, fungi cause an astonishing array of diseases. Each scenario, be it a bat colony decimated by white nose syndrome or a cancer patient battling a bloodstream yeast infection, underscores the adaptability and impact of pathogenic fungi. These organisms often lurk in the environment, unnoticed, until the conditions align for them to strike. When they do, the resulting illness can range from a minor inconvenience to a global health concern. Understanding the diseases fungi cause is not just an academic exercise. It's key to protecting health, biodiversity, and even food security. Next, we turn to how these fungi actually cause disease once they're in a host. What damage do they do? And how do they outwit the defenses of the organisms they infect? Once a fungus invades a host, how does it actually cause illness? The mere presence of microbes in the body isn't enough to make one sick. It's what they do inside that tips the balance. Fungi are unique pathogens in many ways. They are eukaryotes like us, with complex cells, which means they don't typically produce the rapid-fire toxins that bacteria do. Instead, fungal disease often results from a slower, insidious process. The fungus grows in or on tissues, destroys cells, and elicits inflammation. Over time, this can wreak havoc on organs and body systems. Several factors determine the damage a fungal infection will cause. The fungus's own arsenal of virulence factors, the site of infection, the load of fungal cells, and the host's immune response. Many pathogenic fungi literally consume parts of their host as they grow. They secrete enzymes that break down host tissues into nutrients they can absorb. For example, dermatophyte fungi secrete keratinases, enzymes that digest keratin proteins in skin and hair. This enzymatic munching causes the characteristic ring-like lesions of ringworm or the crumbling nails of nail fungus. In deeper infections, fungi like Aspergillus can invade blood vessels. Aspergillus fumigatus produces enzymes and physical pressure that allow its hyphae, or filaments, to penetrate through tissue planes. When it invades a blood vessel in the lung, it can cause a blockage and damage the vessel wall, leading to tissue death or infarction and bleeding. Similarly, mucor species in mucormycosis rapidly grow through sinus tissue into blood vessels, cutting off circulation and causing areas of the face to become necrotic. This is why mucormycosis can lead to black, dead tissue. Fungal cells, especially in filamentous form, can mechanically displace or destroy the cells of the host. Fungi are not passive players. They have evolved specific traits to survive and proliferate in hostile host environments. A prime example is the capsule of Cryptococcus neoformans. This yeast surrounds itself with a thick, sugary coat. That capsule makes it difficult for immune cells to grab hold of Cryptococcus and also blunts the immune response. It's essentially a cloak of invisibility and armor in one. Cryptococcus can thus quietly multiply in the cerebrospinal fluid, protected from immediate destruction. Another virulence factor is the ability to withstand high temperatures. To colonize a human or a bird, both warm-blooded animals, a fungus must cope with body heat. Many fungi in the environment simply can't grow at 37 degrees Celsius. Pathogenic fungi often possess special heat shock proteins or other adaptations that let them thrive at human body temperature. This is a crucial virulence trait. The fungus Candida auris, for instance, is noteworthy for being able to grow well at 37 degrees Celsius and even a few degrees above, something that might have contributed to its emergence as a human pathogen. More on that later. Fungi like histoplasma and coccidioids are molds in soil but switch to a yeast or spherule form in tissues. This is known as dimorphism, the ability to switch forms, and is another strategy fungi use to survive and reproduce. This isn't just a party trick, it helps the fungus adapt to different environments. The yeast form of histoplasma can survive inside macrophages, immune cells that ingest pathogens, by resisting the cell's attempts to kill it, another survival strategy. In this way, histoplasma hides within the very cells that are supposed to destroy it. Some fungi produce melanin in their cell walls. Cryptococcus does this, which helps neutralize the reactive oxygen molecules that immune cells use as weapons. In essence, fungi come prepared for battle. They can thicken their cell walls, pump out detoxifying enzymes, or shift their metabolism to thrive in low-oxygen niches inside an abscess. All these virulence factors contribute to their ability to cause disease. As pathogens, fungi extract nutrients from their hosts. They especially crave iron and other micronutrients, which in humans are tightly bound to proteins, a defense mechanism called nutritional immunity. Some fungi secrete chemicals to scavenge iron from host tissues. Others, like Candida albicans, can form biofilms on medical devices or mucosal surfaces, communities of fungal cells enmeshed in a protective matrix. In a biofilm, Candida cells are more resistant to both the immune system and antifungal drugs, allowing them to persist and continue siphoning nutrients. Part of the disease process is not just what the fungus directly does, but how the host's body reacts. Fungi have unique cell wall components, like B-glucans, that our immune system recognizes as danger signals. However, too vigorous an immune response and the result could be collateral damage. For instance, in the lungs, inhaled fungal spores that aren't quickly cleared can trigger inflammation. White blood cells swarm to the area, releasing enzymes and cytokines that can irritate and damage lung tissue while trying to kill the fungus. The result might be pneumonia-like symptoms. In some conditions like allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis, ABPA, people with asthma or cystic fibrosis mount an allergic immune response to aspergillus in their airways. Not an invasive infection, but a robust inflammatory reaction that itself causes coughing, wheezing, and bronchial damage. The immune system sometimes walls off fungal infections in granulomas, another strategy to ward off infection. A granuloma is a ball of immune cells, macrophages and T cells, that encase the fungus, essentially imprisoning it. Diseases like histoplasmosis or coccidioidomycosis often feature granulomas in lungs or other organs, similar to tuberculosis. This granuloma formation is a way for the body to contain the infection, but it can also impair organ function. For example, a granuloma in the lungs reduces the area available for oxygen exchange. If granulomas form in the brain or spinal cord, as can happen with coccidioidal meningitis, they can cause neurological problems. Unlike bacteria, fungi generally don't produce potent exotoxins that cause acute illness, with a few exceptions in specific contexts. However, some fungi do produce metabolites that can have systemic effects. One example is Candida albicans, which in addition to causing direct damage, produces a peptide toxin named candidalicin during mucosal infections. Candidalicin can punch holes in host cell membranes, contributing to tissue damage and pain in conditions like yeast infections. In invasive mold infections, certain metabolites like gliotoxin from Aspergillus can suppress the host's immune response, aiding the fungus in evading destruction. And as will, some fungal compounds can affect the nervous system, albeit usually when ingested rather than produced during infection. Consider the amphibian chytrid fungus again. It causes disease not by deep invasion. It largely stays on the skin, but by a combination of mechanisms. It disrupts skin structure and function, and the frog's body responds by sloughing skin and trying to fight the infection, all to no avail. The end result is that the frog's heart stops due to electrolyte imbalance. In humans, a chronic pulmonary aspergillosis might lead to a cavity in the lung that slowly enlarges and causes coughing of blood. A fungal ball, aspergilloma, can form in such a cavity. Basically a clump of fungal filaments, mucus and debris that sits there and can cause chronic irritation. Each fungus-host interaction has its own pathology, but the common theme is that the fungus, by growing and surviving in the host, undermines the host's normal functions. Fungi cause disease through a combination of invasion, destruction, and provocation. They invade tissues, destroy cells for nutrients, and provoke the immune system, which in trying to fight back can inadvertently damage the body's own tissues. It's a slow burn rather than an explosion. Fungal diseases often develop over weeks to months, chronic and smoldering. This slow pace can make them hard to diagnose and treat, giving the fungus a head start. Deep in a tropical rainforest, an ant clambers up a plant and onto a leaf. It grips the leaf's vein tightly with its mandibles as if its life depends on it. In a sense it does, but not in the way one might think. This ant is already a dead ant walking. Inside its body, a fungus has spread like a network of tendrils, hijacking the insect's muscles. The ant's final act, this summit position bite on a leaf, was not its own decision at all. It was dictated by the fungus Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, often dubbed the zombie ant fungus. In a gruesome climax, days after the ant locks itself in place and dies, a stalk sprouts from the back of its head, growing longer and finally bursting to release spores. These spores shower down onto the forest floor below, where they can infect other ants. This is the spore dispersal strategy of the fungus, and the ant's strange behavior was a crucial part of the plan. The tale of the zombie ant fungus is one of the most dramatic examples of a parasite manipulating host behavior. Researchers have studied how Ophiocordyceps manages this feat. Interestingly, it appears the fungus doesn't actually invade the ant's brain tissue directly. Instead, it forms a fungal network throughout the ant's body, around the brain and within muscle fibers, and likely secretes compounds that alter the ant's nervous system signals. Essentially, the fungus can steer the ant's actions, when to climb, when to bite down, without destroying the brain itself. The result is a fungus-controlled zombie marching to its death. Only a few ants in a colony get infected at any time, perhaps because wiping out the host species entirely would be bad news for the fungus too. The rest of the colony often has no clue that a silent puppeteer has claimed one of their own. Ophiocordyceps is spectacular, but it's not alone. Fungi manipulating animal behavior is more common than one might imagine, though mostly observed in insects and other cold-blooded creatures. Another mind-bending example involves cicadas. There is a genus of fungi called Massospora that infects cicadas, and its strategy is astonishing. It turns the cicadas into hyperactive, sex-crazed, unwitting spore spreaders. Infected cicadas act normal at first, but inside, Massospora fungi are consuming the insect's abdominal tissues and replacing them with a dense plug of fungus. The back end of the cicada eventually sloughs off, packed full of fungal spores. One would think losing large chunks of your body would stop mating behavior, but not for these zombie cicadas. Infected cicadas continue to fly around and attempt to mate relentlessly, trying to copulate with anything they can, even as 2/3 of their abdomen may be missing. What's more, scientists discovered Massospora produces potent drugs, either an amphetamine, cathinone, or psilocybin, the hallucinogenic compound found in magic mushrooms, depending on the species of Massospora. These chemicals likely act on the cicada's brain, suppressing its appetite and boosting its energy and mating drive. The result is an infected cicada that dedicates its remaining days to frantic mating attempts, thereby spreading the fungal spores to other cicadas during contact. There are numerous other examples termed behavior-altering parasitic fungi. In the world of ants alone, different Ophiocordyceps species target different ant species with precision, often timing the host's death positioning to specific microclimate conditions ideal for the fungus. For instance, the ant in our earlier example was guided to a location about 25 centimeters off the ground on the north side of a plant, where temperature and humidity were just right for the fungus to grow. Another fungus, Entomoptera muscae, infects common houseflies and compels them to climb to a high place and die with outstretched wings, a posture that helps the fungus shoot its spores out into the air to rain down on other flies. This summit disease strategy of climbing to a high vantage is seen in multiple fungi that infect insects. Luckily, cordyceps won't be turning us into zombies anytime soon. However, there is a flip side. The focus on fantastical scenarios can obscure a more pressing reality. Fungi are already a serious threat to human health worldwide, just in less cinematic ways. Fungal infections, while often overlooked, are a critical and growing threat to global health. They can range from superficial conditions like athlete's foot to life-threatening systemic diseases, particularly in immunocompromised individuals. More recently, we've begun to understand that certain fungi, like Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, can profoundly alter the behavior of their hosts, most famously in insects, where the fungus manipulates the host's nervous system to propagate itself. This idea of fungal mind control isn't just science fiction, it's rooted in real biology. The popular TV series The Last of Us dramatizes a terrifying extension of this. What if such behavior-altering fungi evolved to infect humans? While purely speculative, the show draws from genuine mycological principles, spotlighting how adaptable, resilient, and potentially disruptive fungi can be. In short, fungal infections matter, not just for their direct health impact, but for what they reveal about the complex interplay between biology, behavior, and evolution. In the age of climate change and increasing antifungal resistance, they may become one of the next great challenges in infectious disease. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to Science Curious.